What up, people? Happy Wednesday. Welcome to another edition of the Finance Rebel Show. Now, y'all know every Wednesday we talk about money. It's Wealthy Wednesdays, right? And today I wanted to do something a little bit special, right? Y'all know it's Black History Month. Y'all know how I feel about Black history. You know how I feel about the ancestors and making sure we always give them their props. So I wanted to continue to do that. But today I wanted to have a conversation about Black wealth versus Black history. And so there's a lot of love for Black wealth. The Black wealth movement it's more prominent now, probably than ever before, probably since Marcus Garvey, right? And since the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X. But Black history doesn't seem like it gets the same amount of love. So today I wanted to have a conversation with Omawale Africa. This is another Philly brother, right? Another Philly brother YouTuber. We're in the mix talking about things. He's talking about money. I'm talking about money. He's talking about culture. I'm talking about culture, but he goes a lot deeper than I do. So I wanted to bring him on today so we could have a conversation about Black history versus Black wealth. So everybody give Brother Omawale, we got to stretch it out, a welcome, a round of applause.
There we go. There we go.
What's up, brother? How you doing?
I can't complain, bro. I'm doing exceptional. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. You know what? In all this haste, I haven't shared this out the way I was supposed to.
I'm still sharing it out right now.
Look at that. Multitasking. Now, you know brothers can't multitask that well.
We get it done.
We leave that to the sisters, but yes, we get it done. We definitely get it done. So, Omawale.
Yes, sir.
How do we know each other? Because you said we met. Because
yes,
we were having a Twitter conversation, and again, forgive me, I am not that good on Twitter. I'm just now starting to figure it out. And so I saw you put it on there, and I was like, "Oh, we met before." So break it down, brother. How are we connected?
Yeah, you and I met in the summer of 2013.
Damn, you got the dates and everything.
Yeah. You know, I'm a historian, right? So the timeline is always important. But
yes, it is.
We connected in the summer of 2013. This was around the time when I was studying for my CPA exam. But I just
stop. You can't just glaze you. You're a CPA?
Yeah.
God damn,
there we go. Drop a bomb for that.
Yes. Yeah. So okay, you know, all right. I'll say what I'm thinking for later, but go ahead. So you're a CPA.
So
I vaguely remember that too.
This is how it occurred. There's a spot in Philly called Strawberry Greens Driving Range. Mm-hmm. It's over on right off of 33rd in Oxford.
Right.
An old head, I forget the elder's name, you know, who runs that spot. But during that summer, I used to be at the drive. That used to be like my downtime, right? Mm-hmm. To like in between studying, I just go to the driving range. I get a bucket of golf balls and just be going ham. And you used to be out there consistently. So there was like a couple of times like we was like not partners, but you was like on the next slot next to me, and we just be having little small conversations or whatever. But I remember you from then.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you remember, but I remember.
So you went to Temple, right?
No, I went to a school called Lehigh.
You went to Lehigh. You didn't do any work at Temple? There was nothing?
I did nothing at Temple. Yeah, so I got my bachelor's in 2013.
Okay.
And the school I was at, they had like a golf facility on the campus. And I had already knew I knew I was going into corporate America. I knew I was going into business world. I knew how big golf was, you know, just to being successful like in corporate America. So I was like, I gotta, you know, start working on my game, you know, in preparation of, you know, getting on my journey to becoming a billionaire, right? Because that was my thinking at the time. That's where my consciousness was at. So, but I really, really enjoyed the game. You know, like I haven't been out in a few years, but like I really came to love the game. You know what I mean? It became a source of like relief, meditation. A very enjoyable game. So yeah, I want to say I started my junior year when I was in college. I actually went out and paid somebody to give me lessons. I paid a golf pro to give me lessons because I wanted to be able to play officially. And then there were some brothers, you know, I was at a PWI, but a few of the brothers who I was there with, Some of them was frat guys, but like they did the golf thing. So like we would just like on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, just go out to like the local golf course and get it in. So when I came back down to Philly, I was at my mom's crib. My family lived in Winfield.
Okay.
I'm born in North Philly, but my family lived in Winfield.
Okay.
So I'm at my mom's crib. So like anytime like I just needed to like debrief or just decompress, I would just go over to Strawberry Green driving range and like just go ham with my driver. Like, and that's where I met you after the first time.
So here's a funny thing, right? Because I saw you said strawberry greens. Never knew that. I don't know if that's the new gentrified term or what. I just call it 33rd Street.
Well, yeah, that was the name of it since back then, though. Since
Okay,
yeah.
I never knew
I ain't
that.
been in some years, but yeah, the official name of it because it was a brother who owned the spot.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and so
and
the official name of it was the Strawberry Greens driving range.
yeah, I never knew that. But I would go over there. I would have we would have fellowships over there, right? Because a buddy of mine, Mr. Manuel Glenn, who uh, radio guy, kind of mentored me, brought me up in radio. The reason why I'm here now, one of the main reasons why I'm here now, he's really, really good in golf.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. A lot of people don't know that, but he's really, really good in golf. And so we would have like these golf meetups just to introduce people to the idea of golf so they could, just explore something a little bit different and feel comfortable because, a lot of us who are in corporate oftentimes find ourselves at these mixers or golf outings and don't know what to do, don't have a clue.
yeah.
And so that was, kind of the whole point of it. Fellowship was another big point of it. I made some friends out of that as well. And lo and behold, we made a connection. And then 10 years later, we're connected again.
That's what's up.
The universe and the ancestors work in a strange way.
Yeah, that's definitely what's up.
Okay, so you CPA,
Yeah,
graduated from Lehigh University.
yeah.
I feel, aren't you on a PhD track somewhere though? Also,
No, I'm not.
you're
So
not.
I'm not. I do grassroots political education. You know what I mean? I use our history as a weapon. You know what I mean? I use our history as a vehicle to help our people contextualize, our present reality. Because, in order to examine, and assess the threats that we're dealing with right now, we got to have some level of historical knowledge, just in terms of our continued fight or our continued plight, whatever you choose to call it. But if you got goals, you're trying to, you got a vision for the future,
Mhm.
for a liberated future for Black people. You need to know the traps that lie ahead, and the best way to get an understanding of what lies ahead is by getting an understanding of what lies in the past. So history is something that's very significant for me. So I would say that I'm a grassroots political educator. I've always been, just like, how do you call it, like an indigenous teacher. Like for an example, I don't have a degree in education, but
Okay.
literally when I graduated, the first thing that I did was I connected with some schools in the city to go and start teaching financial literacy, because that was like right in the vein that I was in at
Mhm.
that time. You know what I mean? That's the pocket that I was in. And for me, the more and more I got back into the community, because I've always been a community person, right? Because even before going away to go to school, right? I was telling you I was born in North Philly. So I was a bit of a knucklehead. I took a very scenic route to get to kind of like where I am right now, right?
Okay.
But when I graduated from high school, I graduated in 2001, and I didn't go straight to school. I kind of like hung around, and I was in the way. Like I really bumped my head quite a bit. But in 2008, I had an opportunity to actually go to college, and it was through a relationship. There was an organization in Philly at the time called Men United for a Better Philadelphia.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but
The name sounds familiar.
well, they said so. 33rd Street, right? 33rd and Girard. You know that big white mansion right there on the corner of 33rd and Girard.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
In the middle of the grass.
in the middle
Yes.
of the grass. Yeah,
Yes.
so that was their headquarters. So,
Okay.
same area, right? So I was working with them in the summer of. I started working with them in October of 2005, and I worked with them through like I want to say like October of 2007, and it was a anti-gun violence organization.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity through connecting with them to connect with a brother who owned the only Black owned resort and the Poconos at the time because
Oh wow.
we used to take the kids from North Philly, get them out of the city, and like spend time with them in a different environment to be able just to really like let them take baby girl, baby girl, baby girl. I'm on a. You can't come back here right now.
Come on, we kid friendly.
Okay.
It's all
All right.
good.
Do me a favor. Just take them off. Okay. Just take them off, and when I'm done, I'm gonna help you out. All right. I love you. All right. So, pardon me. That was my,
No. Listen, I got babies. I totally understand.
yeah. That was no. That's my 4-year-old. But yeah. So what I was saying was, so we used to take them out of the city every summer just to get them away from the city, away from the madness. It's wild now, but it was wild back then too. Like
Mhm.
I remember in 2007, like the murder rate was it was like through the roof. But long story short, through that opportunity, that opportunity opened up so many doors for me because the first thing it did for me was it gave me the opportunity to work in the school district of Philadelphia. I was adolescence violence reduction specialist was like the official title, but it was through like the school district's community partner program or whatever. So through connecting with a non-for-profit, I got a chance to work in the school. So in addition to that, I got a chance to connect with the brother who owned this resort up in the Poconos.
Mm.
And long story short, when I was like I was going through a lot in '07. I reached out to the brother. I was telling him everything that I was going through. And I was like, yo, I just need a spot that I can like come to and just clear my head. You know what I'm saying? Like really, clear my head. And I think I want to come back and I want to start school. I want to start community college here in Philly. And he was like, well, shit, why don't you just come up here and go to school here? So
Mhm.
I ended up going up there, and over the next between 2008 and 2013 is when I basically graduated with a bachelor's degree in accounting, but I was 29 at the time when I graduated
You
with a
about to have
bachelor's.
some fun.
Yeah, I graduated a bachelor's degree in accounting, and then like so it was like once I finished school, the community was always in my heart. So the first thing I did I was like, well, I got to get back into the community. So for me, the first vehicle was like, okay, I'm gonna work with the kids. I'm gonna teach financial literacy. So that's what I was doing. I was a sister that I went to high school with was a teacher at the time at a school on Germantown and Venango, like right next to Temple's emergency room. And
Uh,
she just let me come in just like teach financial literacy like to her students. But then in addition to that, there's a golf course on Queen Lane, and they had a program there called like the First Tee, and it was like a golf program where you teach kind of like the lessons of life. You teach kids the lessons of life through like the game of golf. So like those was my two primary community engagement activities. This is in 2013, 2014. And then if you fast forward like towards the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, I had actually my undergraduate minor was entrepreneurship.
okay.
I had the opportunity to spend some time out in the Silicon Valley, learn the whole startup venture capital ecosystem while out there. So I always had that piece in the back of my mind as well, like, just being a startup founder. So 2014, 2015, I had the opportunity to actually, launch a company, try to go through the whole process of, securing venture funding, which, that's a story unto itself. But that's really what, I was on that journey pretty hard. And if you want to know like what the inflection point was that put me where I am now, I always tell people that inflection point for me was the summer of 2016, the murder of Philando Castile and the
Mhm.
murder of Alton Sterling. Because when that situation occurred, like my entire consciousness, like it's something just like jolted like with inside of me, and my spirit was like like the gifts, the talents, the skills that you got aren't meant for you to be building this kind of like billion-dollar organization. You need to be using your skill set to teach, to educate, to build for power within our community, right, to address the conditions within our community. So I started my journey. You mentioned Garvey when we was offline. I started my journey. I joined the UNIA, which is located right on 16 with Cecil B. Moore.
Yep.
I joined there, I think in May or June of 2016. I joined and became a member. And at the end of the year, there was an opportunity for me to take a role in the leadership. So I became like the president of the chapter there. But
Mhm.
that's how I started my journey. And then the educational piece is because as I was learning, I was also teaching. So it was like, it was like this, we needed political education. So as I was, so we started to hold these like ciphers every Wednesday night where, we was just really digging into like the history. And the thing is, it's just that I never stopped. You know what I mean? I consume information just like I have the ability to consume a lot of information, a lot of dense information. And I can really like, you know, um, I guess that's that analytical accounting mindset, but like I can really consume a lot of information, synthesize it, and draw insights and make historical connections with just being introduced to information on a sometimes on a cursory, but more so on a deeper dive. And I just never stopped that particular learning journey. And the more I learned, the more I grew, the more serious I became. And I've just been consistently doing this now for, I want to say, the last 7 years.
Nice, nice, nice.
Yeah.
So you're organizing, and during the day, are you a CPA? Are you working in
I
accounting?
work I work full time. I'm on the plantation. I haven't found a way to liberate myself. You know what I mean? When you climb so high up, it's like how they call it. They call it like lifestyle creep or whatever. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's not easy for me, somebody like me in a position that I'm in at the moment, to essentially be like, well, I'm just not going to, work in corporate America. I'm just going like, because I don't have it to do that. You know what I mean? Like I don't where I am, carrying a household, carrying a wife, carrying 3 children on my back. Like my family would suffer immensely.
Absolutely.
I'm saying if
And the first mandate of black manhood and familyhood is, or the first mandate of black men is to take care of our families.
yeah, give me a
Because
second.
if,
Okay.
'cause if we can't do that, we're not doing anything, in my opinion, anyway.
Okay. All right. Just get okay. I'm almost done. All right. I'll be done
So
in a little bit.
everybody, while we're waiting, just wanted to give props to everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're watching the Finance Rebel Show. We are live every Wednesday. Now y'all know I will jump in and out on different days, but y'all know Wednesday is our day at 8 p.m. So I just wanted to say what's up to some people. What's up, Thunder? How are you? Don Johnson, the legend. What's up, brother? Welcome,
Peace,
welcome,
peace,
welcome.
peace.
Kagoma, how are you? Watching from 513. I'm guessing that's an area code.
I feel like that's New Orleans. I might be wrong though.
Mm.
Let me know is that New Orleans. Y'all let me know.
All right. Don Johnson said he didn't know that.
Yeah.
I guess Don didn't know you were from Philly. Hey, Kara, how are you? We just catching up. We just catching up. Two brothers from Philly happen to bump into each other on the YouTubes and the Twitters and the Instagrams.
Yeah.
It's funny how that happens. Back lady, how are you? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday to you all. Okay, so Philando Castile, a lot of the police brutality kind of got your mind thinking, I don't want to say back into, but focus back into the community,
Yeah.
still trying to balance, I guess, 9 to 5 life with community life. And we're
Yeah.
doing more on the socials with a lot of history, a lot of teaching. See, Jumbo, welcome, welcome, welcome. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's oh man, I'm getting old. The ones and zeros, is that code? Oh, the CPA part. Okay, gotcha. But Jumbo, to you as well. 000777931. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so Don Johnson didn't know you CPA. Listen, man, black accountants are powerful, brother.
Yes, sir.
We are a secret weapon, and y'all don't even realize it. Show us some love. All right, so you're trying to figure out now, or doing your thing. You got the Black Wealth Network, not the Black Wealth Network, the American Wealth Network. So everybody, make sure y'all go follow that as well. That's one of Omar Wali's channels, and then you have the Omar Wali Africa channel as well.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
go
Go,
ahead. No, go
yeah.
ahead.
I don't want to cut your. I don't want to cut your wisdom. Let you get your question
No,
out.
you good. You good.
Yeah. So the two channels, right? There's a huge gap in between, you know, me becoming uh me becoming an organizer. You know what I mean? Like, well, I don't want to say becoming an organizer because I've always worked in some level. Even during my collegiate experience. You know what I mean? I was a student organizer, right? So the skills that I developed have been developed over a 20-year period at this point. You know what I mean? Because I started my organizing background, let's say, at the age of 19. But even prior to that, like my dad was heavily involved in the community organizing. So like I had the chance to watch his experience in the church. So that background has always been there. But like coming out of the UNIA, I had joined another organization in Philly, up in Germantown called Afrocentricity International.
Is
And I
that Dr.
Malefi Asante.
Malete Asante, the OG? Yes,
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
yes.
well, that you know that stands in a very interesting space. But yeah, essentially, Dr. Asante and Dr. Amamazama co-founded an org in 2011 called Afrocentricity International.
Mm.
So I connected with them. So like right after my inauguration to the UNIA, there was a brother, a beautiful brother named Brother Ebo. He was
Mm.
at my inauguration and he was like, "Yo, you got to come speak at the center one day, meeting the Malefe Kete Asante Institute." And I was like, "Yeah, no doubt, I'll definitely come up and I'll speak." So I used to be there a lot, and then one day Dr. Asante said to me, he said, "Brother, you gotta come give a presentation." So I think it was October the 17th of 2017. I gave my first ever like public lecture, my first ever like public, like teaching, like giving a presentation. And that was at the Malefic at the Asante Institute. The name of that lecture was The Polluted Stream of Black Political Consciousness. So since then, like organizing and teaching have always like going hand in hand. And the reason why I started to do, because I write as well, but the reason why I started to do like the YouTube in the first place is because I wanted to figure out a way to more effectively kind of like spread the information or build an audience, build a platform. So that was kind of like the development of the YouTube channel, which you asked me just now about like the second channel. So I have the Omawali Africa channel, but then I just have this channel that I just recently created called the American Wealth Network. So it does, baby girl. It looks like a burrito. All right. All right. So yeah, so no, the second channel, I actually just created this channel in I created it in December of 2022, the American Wealth Network. And the reason why I created it is because, I was looking at the financial literacy movement, right? And there's a lot of energy around that particular movement. But my contention is that, you know, while it's good that there's excitement and there's a desire to build wealth, one of the things that I notice about the movement is that it's not historically or politically literate.
Not at all.
And for me, I felt like that, that's dangerous because that level of short-sightedness, right? You don't have foresight and or hindsight. If you don't have hindsight, you also don't have foresight, right? Because you can only see forward as far as you can see back. You understand what I'm saying? So I was like, this is dangerous, right? So I said, you know what? I'm going to insert myself into this conversation, but from a different perspective. So I
Okay.
created a platform called The Other Side of the Coin. And basically the show I created a show. The show is called The Other Side of the Coin. And that whole perspective is essentially, I'm trying to give the other side to the financial literacy conversation, which is the political literacy, because the two
You
are
can't have one without the other,
yeah, they're
in my opinion.
interwoven. You understand what I'm saying? Because my issue is that, rather than trying to, to integrate onto the white star line, you know what I'm saying? We need to be trying to build the black star line. You understand what I'm saying? And that because Garvey's economic efforts weren't just economic, they weren't financial, they weren't just financial, they were political as well. And I feel
They
like
were political, they were cultural, they were economic, they were holistic.
yes,
And not to cut you off, but I don't know if you've ever watched any of my stuff.
never,
Um,
never.
but
This is my first time engaging
you
with you.
are preaching to the gospel, to the choir rather.
Yeah.
And I feel you on that. So much so. One, I hate the term financial literacy because the term was hijacked mainly by banks and credit card companies to basically pacify people. I liken it to the drug dealer bringing turkeys on Thanksgiving Day.
Mm,
Um, we need financial education
yeah.
because we don't need surface literacy. We need deep understanding. You never want a child to just be literate when it comes to reading. You want them to be able to be literate to comprehend, to communicate, and that doesn't happen just at literacy alone. So I would say that that's a bit short-sighted, but it's the catchphrase, right? I even
Yeah.
catch myself using the term sometimes, but I hate that term. And people always like, why? Why do you hate the term? Because it's basically an easy way to pimp people out. But
And that's, what you just said is a part of this space that kind of like disgusts me. Like there is an element of like of of mega churches that exist. You know what I mean? Of like of finessing people, like people who have a desire to learn and to build wealth, and you have people that are selling essentially like fish oil, and those are the
they selling
elements of,
crack.
yeah, those are the elements of the financial literacy, the financial education space that I dislike. So I was like, you know what? Let me create a channel, and if you go and read the if you read the about section on that channel, what I'm doing is I'm merging my professional with my political, with the cultural, right? Because professionally, I work as a risk management expert, right? I've been doing that. People always have, you're a CPA, you do taxes. I'm like, no, I haven't done taxes in my life. I started my career in audit, doing financial statement audits. That kind of like got more broad to doing enterprise risk management. And now I'm just a well-rounded risk management expert, right? So
Mhm.
it's in this environment right now, like the the risk perspective is probably like the most valuable perspective that you can have to kind of like inform your analysis,
God,
just because there's just so much uncertainty about what's coming down the road. And with that uncertainty, the only thing that you can do is use calculus to infer, to make the best decision based upon the limited amount of information that you have. So it becomes just the ability to draw insights and connect pieces, connect the dots, and that insight that you draw becomes very valuable, right? So what I'm trying to provide with the American Wealth Network is political and economic, or I like to refer to it as macroeconomic and geopolitical insights for our community, so that we can understand the opportunities and the threats that exist in this current moment, and where we need to be deploying our resources to advance our agenda, right? So that's what I'm trying to do with the American Wealth Network.
so I'm laughing, and I'm not laughing at you, brother.
Mhm.
I'm laughing with you because everything you just said is everything I preach. Risk management. Well, so just to give you a bit of background on me, um, my father was an accountant. I wound up becoming an accountant, but in that journey, financial advisor, institutional money manager, doing macro global economic analysis. And that's how I did my investment analysis when I ran a fund. And then now, full circle, I'm back now as a tax accountant, building out a firm. And those are a lot of the main tenets that I talk about, especially risk. And I'd say all the time, we can't be serious about wealth building if we don't understand risk. And most people don't understand risk. And it's very, very one dangerous, but it's also very interesting when we come to have these conversations. But I'm also realizing I'm getting older. So my tolerance for certain things um, is getting shorter and shorter because I see people online trying to sell their wares, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
They're just, and listen, there's nothing wrong with selling. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with providing value. But these people aren't providing value. They're lying, like
Yeah, they
flat out
hustling.
lying.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
hustling. Yeah.
yeah. And the bad hustle, not the good hustle
Yeah.
that we talk about in the community. Like it's really bad and it's really dangerous. And so I get confronted with this all the time. People send me stuff. People come to me to fix some of their problems. And that's happened over the years, from being on radio at WRD here in Philly, because our trajectory is very, very similar. Obviously, I'm a little older, right? I'm bald. You got your hairline intact, right? So you still good. But the trajectory is very similar, and you'll come to find like I don't know about folks because very much like you, you'll hear me say the reason why I went into finance, because my major was finance. But again, my dad was an accountant, so I was privileged from that standpoint. But I always wondered why the community always had money issues.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, if we can figure out this money thing, we'll be all right. But then I realized it's not a money. We don't have a money issue. We have a culture issue. And I usually don't even say that publicly because people are like, well, what do you mean by that? We have culture. And I'm like, no, not really. And it goes into a whole other conversation that goes super deep. And it's really hard to have if people aren't on the same timeline or the same wavelength. And sometimes it can become, I don't want to say disrespectful, but it can become really challenging because I watched you and the brother last week
Yeah. Yeah.
debate FBA, Foundational Black American, and I saw you struggling a little bit because I know you was trying to come with love, but then I also saw you struggle a little bit, and I got it. So it can be really challenging at times, like really looking like we're promoting G wagons and we're promoting this lavish lifestyle. And again, there's nothing wrong with living good and having a good quality lifestyle,
Let me
but our babies don't have books. So what's the priority, folks? But real quick before you jump in, I just wanted to read the about section, right?
Yeah, for sure.
From your channel.
Yes, sir.
All right. So the American Wealth Network, the description. This channel covers the history of American wealth, geopolitics, money, power, and culture. Omawali Africa's unique mix of professional and educational experience has equipped him with a forward-looking point of view on a complex set of global issues faced by businesses and individuals alike. So I'll just leave it there. But I applaud you for doing that.
I appreciate that for sure. Yeah, man.
We need more politically conscious money talk.
For sure, because it's funny. I just shared a clip the other day from Dr. John Henry Clark. So he has a book that he wrote. It's called Notes on the African World Revolution, and Dr. Clark, most of his presentations, his lectures, or most of his books, you can find lectures associated with the book. So in this particular lecture for Notes on the African World Revolution, he was very clear that he said we as Africans in America, we have to engage in a commercial revolution. He said that we need a commercial revolution just as bad as we need a spiritual revolution, right? In order to kind of like get back what's kind of like been taken away from us. And for me, it's like one of the platforms that I have is called the African War College. That's my educational platform. And business is warfare. Business is it's another form of human competition. And if you don't understand the modern mechanisms of economic warfare, then you're not prepared to compete, and you won't be able to survive in this present reality. And one of the things that I love about what Dr. Clark said in that presentation is that we have a responsibility to master these mechanisms. And he was like, he went further and stated, you know, I don't got no love for capitalism. He was like, because Dr. John Henry Clark was a socialist, but he said, but at the end of the day, I understand that in order to survive in the Western world, it requires capital. And then he started to use Japan, in terms of how they developed and how they modernized their economy, and how culture was essential to the way, that they advanced their business and their economic interests. And it's like, once you really start to understand trade and commerce as just another battlefield, then like you can really intelligently just apply like wisdom and insight to kind of like advance your goals, your economic goals, your political goals. But I think the trick bag that we've got caught in over the 20th century, Black America was stuck in a vice grip in this Cold War vice grip, where you have the Eastern Bloc, so the communist powers, and then you have the West, the capitalist powers. And because the capitalist powers were doing so much to damage us, many of us we decided that we're going to completely be against capitalism. And the way that we kind of like align that in our minds is that means that we got to be against like business. And I'm like, this doesn't This doesn't make sense. It's not intelligent. And if you look at the nations that were a part of that Eastern Bloc, all of them, to one extent or another, whether it be Russia, whether it be China, all of them, right, have developed some form of capital, of modernizing their economy so that they compete, so that they can compete on the world stage. And the beauty of this is, let's say that they had not modernized their economy. Russia right now is being sanctioned by the US. But you know what? Because Russia has a relationship with China, because Russia has a relationship with South Africa, with India, with Brazil, the BRICS nations, Russia now has the ability to withstand and still, survive as a nation, even though it's being sanctioned economically. Now, what would occur if Russia said, you know what, we're not going to do business because business is wrong and capitalism is wrong? Like, these are
Yeah,
not
people would starve.
these are not intelligent responses. And many of the responses and attacks that I see against business, to be honest, they're dogmatic. So a part of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help people to better understand economic warfare, because when you understand economic warfare, then you can understand that, a company is a political instrument, it's an economic instrument, it's a cultural instrument. Like, this company, this enterprise is a critical vehicle for wealth creation and development. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, if we're really trying to do our thing economically, right? If we're really trying to liberate ourselves, like, that requires capital, it requires resources, right? It requires the management of resources, human capital, and commercial capital. Like, all of this is necessary.
So for the community that's watching, for the audience that's watching, right? Let's talk about it, right? We're talking about Black history versus Black wealth,
Yeah.
and we're kind of intertwining the conversation, very much so. But I want to play that clip at some point that Omawale just brought up with the great Dr. Henry Clark, who very much was a student of Malcolm X, loved Malcolm X, thought Malcolm X was probably the pinnacle of
It's actually the other way around.
what's that?
That Malcolm X was a student of Dr. John Henry Clark. So Malcolm X had a board of advisors who
Okay.
he went to, because Malcolm X was debating a lot, and like, you can't know all things, so you
It's
got to have a
impossible.
circle of people that you go to. Like, this is the person, and so basically, John Henry Clark was one of those scholars who was on Malcolm's board of advisors. So much of Malcolm's
I don't think I knew that.
much of his Pan African consciousness comes from being advised from Dr. John Henry Clark.
I will need to go back and do my research on that, but
That's
I will
good.
take your word for it, because the reason I said he was a student, was because I watched a lecture, because I love Dr. Clark. Like,
Mhm.
to me, Dr. Clark is like the epitome of everything. I don't agree with everything he says, right? I'm not really for socialism. That's a different conversation. But at the end, matter of fact, I don't want to give it away. Let's just go to the clip, because I'm not going to do it justice. Give me 1 second. But what I was saying was, Dr. Clark, he understood, and I watched him say that he felt Malcolm was the pinnacle, what to be in the Black power struggle.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's why I got it confused. But thank you for straightening me out, brother.
That's all love, bro.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's.
The modern capitalist world rolls on slavery and exploitation of all people, black and white. I have no vested interest in its survival. If it goes, it goes. And yet, I know that you cannot live in a capitalist society with any degree of safety and comfort without having capital. Now, it seems that I'm engaged in a contradiction. If I believe in socialism, and I do, why do I believe just as much in black ownership of black communities? Which seems to you is communism, it's capitalism. But to me, black ownership of black community places in the hands of black people the economic means to affect social change in their favor. Build a private school if you don't like the public school. Use your politics to bring more pressure on the public schools. And always look back in order to look forward. How did African people rule states before this encroachment? They're as African as you. If they did this, they had something you failed to have, and that is self-confidence.
Boom. So I would love to watch this whole thing, but it's about 6 minutes. I don't want to kill everybody else, but self-confidence is a major thing that we often lack, in my opinion, but I believe that's due to us not truly knowing what our culture is and knowing what our history is. So going back to Black history versus Black wealth, this movement hasn't had this much steam, fervor since Malcolm X, maybe, Marcus Garvey, maybe, but throughout those times, history was always pinnacle, was always important. Now it seems like not as much.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm just the old guy that's just saying, you young fellas, you young folks don't got it together.
No, you're right though. You're right, and I think that's the critical. That's the issue of this moment. The issue of this moment is that the so-called Black wealth movement is detached from a legitimate Black political, right? Because the two, you cannot separate them, right? The four people that Dr. Clark named in that presentation, who he said we need to study. He said we need to go and study Booker T. Washington. We need to study Du Bois, we need to study Garvey, and we need to study the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because each of them had an economic program, but the economic program and the political program were associated. In fact, what Garvey was building was much more than an economic program or political program. Garvey was building a government, right? Garvey was building the UNIA. If you read the Constitution, I mean, it has a Constitution, but it tells you at the very beginning of the Constitution that this document is for a provisional government. If you understand what a provisional government is, it's a government that you put in place in anticipation of the development of a nation, which means in anticipation of the securing of land in which you'll house that nation, right? So he said, we are a provisional government. We have a constitution. We have a constitutional body. We have an annual convention where we convene and we pass laws. I organized in 2020. I organized an event to observe the 100-year anniversary of the Declaration of Rights of Negro Peoples of the World. Right, the Declaration of Rights of Negro Peoples of the World was housed in It was held in 1920 at Madison Square Garden. Go ahead.
You're getting fancy on us. Tell folks what that is.
So the Declaration of Rights of Negro Peoples of the World was a declaration of independence, essentially, that Black people signed for themselves on August the 13th, 1920. The UNIA, which was Marcus Garvey's organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, they held a month-long convention during August of 1920. But on the 13th, one of their events was held at Madison Square Garden, had over 20,000 Black people in attendance with representation from all across the globe. At that event, they essentially signed their Declaration of Rights, and Article number 13 of that declaration states, the colors of the race will be red, black, and green. So when you see folks today like wearing the red, black, and green, or the red, black, and green flag, so that flag that's not like an African American flag or an African heritage, that's the flag of a nation, because the UNIA was advancing this concept that we represent members of a nation. And what they were trying to do was to remember or pull back together this body that had been strewn all across the planet as a result, of the Ma'afa, as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. So it was like focus on the commonality that we have and remember that as Africa goes, so too does the rest of us. So Garvey wasn't trying to like, the reason why he called it the universal Negro improvement soldiers, because he said we're universal people. He doesn't need African Americans going back to Africa. No, he says some of us need to go, but ultimately the goal for that particular movement was the development of a Pan-African superpower that exists on the African continent that would be strong enough to protect the interests of African people everywhere. Similar to how Israel, through the Zionist movement, had as its goal the goal of an ethnic state that would be strong enough to protect those people who were harmed in Germany, right? Will be strong enough to protect their interests everywhere, right? So
across the world.
It's like, strong people take care of themselves wherever they are. This is why when Japan developed to the source of strength that it developed to, America had to apologize to Japan. And as a part of that apology, they had to pay reparations to those Japanese family members who were put into internment camps during World War II. But America wouldn't apologize to Japan if Japan wasn't strong.
Absolutely.
Japan was the economic might of the 20th century. Right, so much so that by the end of the 80s, like it's funny, right? Warren Buffett recently, he did an analysis. He did a 30-year look back analysis where he looked at the top 20 companies by market cap size from 1989, and then he looked at them I think in 2020, and he just showed that basically his goal for that particular analysis was to show that like the majority of the companies who were there in 1989 are not even on the list in 2021, right? But if you look at the 1989 list, Japan got like 13 companies out of the 20. So it's like Japan was strong economically, culturally, militarily, right? But, they got us in this trick bag where it's like, the same thing. Money is evil. To do business is, it's wrong. We don't need to be trying to be doing no business, brother. It's like, nah, this business is an aspect of the warfare that we have to master, which is why I really appreciate Dr. Clark saying in that particular segment that we need a commercial revolution. And people might say, well, that's a contradiction, Dr. Clark, but he's saying like we can't survive without it. It's a necessity at this point.
And it's very much like Malcolm said, by any means necessary. Now, everybody kind of thinks when Malcolm says that it's the call to bear arms, but it was deeper than just a call to bear arms. It was a call to read a book.
Yeah.
It was a call to walk your sisters and children across the street. It was a call to do whatever was necessary to keep Black people in good standing. And I had the opportunity to work with Brother Malcolm's one of his children, so I got to see some of his stuff up and close. So when you go deep on these things, there's a lot of gems, right? There's a lot of things there. And going back to what Dr. Clark just said, right, and tying it back into Black history versus Black wealth. When you think about Garvey, when you think about Elijah Muhammad, when you think about Malcolm X, when you think about King, right? When you think about Du Bois, when you think about Booker T, they had many of the answers. Sadly, we abandoned a lot of what they told us to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of it could work, but a lot of people will say, well, that old school stuff, that don't work. I would beg to differ. We never really gave it a chance to really grow and ferment and take root so it could spring forth and blossom into trees and develop fruit. But it's sad because, again, as you said earlier, we need our history. We need to be able to look back, not live in the history, right? Not live in the past, but know what happened to us in the past to help direct us in the future.
Yeah, and that look back, that analysis of the past has to be sophisticated. It's not enough just to know the personalities that exist or the slogans, Black Power.
What do you mean when you say sophisticated, though? Break it down for them.
Oh man. So when I say sophisticated, oh man, I think it was was it Damian Marley that said the world is a big crime scene? Right? Like you have to, when you examine history, you have to look at things almost as like an investigative journalist. You're a detective, like searching for clues to solve the crime, right? So ultimately, what I mean by you have to have a sophisticated analysis, it's not enough to know that Malcolm was in the Nation of Islam and he's pitted as the antithesis to Dr. King, right? That's the elementary analysis. Malcolm said white folks were the devil, right? You have to, in order to understand Malcolm, you have to understand his continuity and you have to understand his context. You have to understand that he was a child of two Garveyites.
Right. Oh
Right?
man, you talking my
That's
language. I say that
that's
all the time.
yeah, that's critical. You have to understand that. You have to understand that when Malcolm was in when Malcolm was in prison, which he referred to as his collegiate experience,
Mhm.
Malcolm had access. Malcolm was a deep reader, and he had access to a library that is better than the libraries in some community colleges today. Right? He was on a debate team. He was a world class debater, right? Because a lot of people like to tell this thing that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and much respect due, because even Malcolm gives the Honorable Elijah Muhammad credit for lifting him up and cleaning him up.
Mhm.
But Malcolm was a tool which allowed him to be so effective for the Nation of Islam because he was a debater, because he knew history, because he had this attachment to historical black movements, right? He's the child of organizers. But
Yep.
even beyond that, even beyond his experience with
But hold on.
with the
Take a comma real quick.
go ahead.
Because I don't think people realize Malcolm's tied to Garvey. Elijah Muhammad's tied to
Garvey.
Garvey,
Yeah.
right? So, like you said, when you put it all together, the roads still kind of come back to Garvey. And you can say Booker T and W. Du Bois to a certain degree, but all roads still lead to Garvey.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
Well, Garvey is an extension of Booker T. Washington, and Du Bois
yeah,
was also an extension of Booker T. Washington. Du Bois tried to so the difference between Du Bois and Booker is that Booker was born in slavery, and
right.
Du Bois was born
And the North.
in the North, and he was born free, and he was the
Yes.
descendant of several free generations. So he could never have the lens that Booker T. Washington had, which is what led to Souls of Black Folk in 1903 when he departed from Booker T. Washington, only to come back to Booker T. Washington in 1933. Right? It took Du Bois. See. The difference. I like to say it like this: Du Bois was trying to do an analysis to understand why water is wet, and Booker T. Washington was trying to build a ship. Because Booker T. Washington had already had like this intuitive instinct, having been born in slavery. He understood racism. He understood white people to an extent that Du Bois couldn't, because Du Bois didn't have that experience. Now, when Du Bois comes to the South and he's teaching in the South. I mean, Du Bois, when did he write the Litany of Atlanta? Did he write that? He wrote it after the Atlanta race
In a
riots,
conference. Yeah, I'm not
which I
totally
think
sure.
happened in 1907. But if you read that, I mean, Du Bois is calling white folks devils because he's like he had never. It just peeled the wool off of his eyes. And after the Great Depression, essentially Du Bois circles back to the point that his liberal allies are saying, Du Bois, you sound like a latter-day Booker T. Washington. Right. So I say that to say that both Garvey and Du Bois come from Booker T. Washington. And but the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm come from Garvey. I think that's important.
Yes, yes. But just to talk about Booker and Du Bois, right? I think it's also very important to see that major black figures always wound up in some kind of conflict somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to figure out going forward, right? Learning from the past, going forward to avoid that at all costs. At least publicly. I don't know if you can totally do it because Du Bois also had a different viewpoint, which I think was accurate, right? You need the intellectual, you need the people who are going to work in politics and academia. And for the record, Booker T was never against academia,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of people paint that brush, but they're like, the man was at Hampton, right? He was the president of Hampton, president at Tuskegee. He clearly was a man of academia. He clearly was a man of knowledge. So, people say, well, Booker T just wanted us to get jobs and get businesses, and it would work. It's so much deeper than that.
Booker T wanted us to be fully self-reliant. He wanted us to be able to economically set our own course. And he said that we were in the best position to do so at that point in time. Like coming out of, we had all the skills. We controlled all the labor in the economy, right? We controlled not just the so-called unskilled labor, but we also controlled the skilled labor. Right. So
I think Booker T also got to see what happened in Reconstruction, where black folks
the failure of Reconstruction. He got to see that up close and personal.
Yeah, black folks are very vibrant. People don't realize that, right? And that's why, and I believe you will probably agree with this, right? It's important for money and politics to dwell together and work together when we're talking about black folks. You can't really have one without the other.
Yeah.
But the boys talk more about so-called politics, or was typecast to say politics, and Booker T was more about industry. But when, like you said, when you go a little bit deeper, they're put into those corners, but it's way deeper than that. It's
absolutely, and they both have much more breadth, because Booker was very political as well, and Du Bois also had economic plans. I mean, like Du Bois, one of his 3 components that he wanted to bring forth was like the whole cooperative economics, and I think a big part of that he learned from his observations while working with Booker T. Washington, right? Because in order for us to survive throughout the South, we had to have this cooperative, we had to have this, like, so that's the only way for us to survive, kind of like in that environment. So I think that they both get typecast, and people, again, when I talk about like that sophisticated analysis, like you really have to look at their development.
So basically when you say sophisticated, all right, you're basically saying don't be surface.
Yeah, you
go deeper.
You have to go deep, you have to draw the insights, but I always talk about 2 C's, continuity and context. And that's oftentimes missing and it's so important because the context matters, right? When we look at things like the civil rights movement, if you remove the concessions that we so-called gained from the civil rights movement from the context that there's a Cold War happening, then you don't see like how our opposition finesses and maneuvers, us on the domestic front in order to contend with what they have going on on the international front. All these things are important. Like I tell people all the time, I say when you look at the Brown versus Board of Education, like when it got through the Supreme Court, do you know when it got through the Supreme Court? It got through the Supreme Court
54 or 53.
Yeah, 10 days after the French fell in Vietnam. And the U.S. knew that it had to go into the war, and understood that that if I'm going to be a new colonial face, I have to show it. I can't show the face of the old colonizer. And Malcolm talks about this.
Right. Well, I was about to say, because Malcolm always talked about during that time, the winds of change don't happen in a vacuum. I believe that's the quote.
Well, that's what's important. That context, because and that's the importance of this moment. So I have a presentation coming up called Trade Mageddon, and I called it. So when I put that presentation together, I put a pitch deck together at the beginning of December. And I know a few people who know like the folks in the EYL network, because I wanted to see if I could potentially, do it on their particular show, because my thing is like they have a rapidly growing audience. The financial content is, it is what it is, but like the political content is completely missing. So
are you familiar with the Come Up Show? Or hold on.
QDZ?
No.
Oh,
no.
Cosmic Kev?
No, it's not Philly. It's hold on. Come Up series, I think it is. So the Come Up series with Mark Morrell. Are you familiar with them?
No.
So they are dope, and they have a very strong tribe. It's not nowhere near as big, but they have a strong tribe. Look them up. They talk about Black history all the time. That's one of the reasons why I appreciate them so much. And Mark, I believe he was some kind of startup founder. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a lot more conscious talk on that show. It's called the Come Up series.
Send me a link to it.
I will.
I couldn't find it on Google. Send me a link. I'll check it out.
I
But
will absolutely submit. So I was going to say that might be a better pitch.
yeah, I mean, right now, but I'm telling you why I created the American Wealth Network.
Okay.
Because I needed a platform to be able to do it on, and I just felt like the Omawali Africa channel, like people are going to like pigeonhole you. They're going to look at
Mhm.
that and I'm like, well, that's not somebody I should be listening to for about business or macroeconomics. So I was like, well, let me create a separate channel that I can use for that analysis. Don't do that, baby. I'm almost done. Okay, give me 10 minutes.
I don't know. The way we go, we might be here a lot longer.
Yeah. Just give me
She
10
gonna
minutes.
cut it short though.
Yeah.
So listen, for everybody that's watching, to do me a favor, tell me, what do you think is more important? Is Black history more important, or is Black wealth more important? Tell me what you think. Drop it in the chat.
Mm.
So I oftentimes, it's refreshing to finally catch up with you after all these years. I do want to talk about this though, capitalism, because Dr. Clark brought it up. And what I would say is, I think we get caught up sometimes in definitions,
Mhm.
and sometimes they're wrong. We don't know what capitalism is
No.
because we don't live in a true capitalistic society. Because when you look at a true capitalistic society, it talks about private ownership.
Yeah, we don't. There's no such thing as a true. There's no fully. All economies are mixed economies. All
Exactly.
economies have elements of both,
Okay.
capitalism and socialism.
All right, right. So, especially in the United States, where the majority of the audience is, right? So, we don't have a true capitalistic society. I don't think people really understand what capitalism is.
Yeah.
Even when we go to Adam Smith, the quote unquote father of capitalism, quote unquote father of capitalism, he would just say people were coming to the market with their goods and services to exchange without government interference. And so this notion of taxes, this notion of government-owned property and businesses is not capitalistic at all. So when I see folks in the Black conscious community say, we are anti-capitalist, I am always confused because I'm like, I feel you're too smart to just play word games.
Yeah, it's dogmatic.
Yes.
It's again, nothing. How you say nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything happens in the context, right? So the big part of that is Black people in America. You know how they say you don't know what you don't know. Much of our relationship to capitalism came via our economic education that we were given via communism.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And it's not a you have to do the education for yourself. And that's a big part of what, like, for example, at the beginning of this next presentation, a big part of what I want to do is I want to put a lot of these terms within the context of economic warfare. And in order to do that, some of the terms I think is important just to break down like their etymology. Like here's a good one, right? I know it's probably a little bit longer for you than it was for me, but 13 or 14 years ago when I took my first intro to economics course, this definition has always stuck with me of what the definition of economics is. And it says that the definition, this is the textbook definition, right? Economics is the optimal allocation of resources under conditions of scarcity, right? That statement there's a lot of deep statements within that, right? Because there's some political and cultural statements in there that you have to unpack, but there's also some economic statements, right? I mean, it's the definition of economics, but here's a word that I want folks to wrestle with.
Well, hold on, let me push back real quick. Not even really a pushback. The way I was taught in the textbook definition for economics for me was the study of scarce resources, because nothing is infinite, right? Your water, your gold, your cobalt is all finite, right? It doesn't last forever. So it's a study of scarce resources. That's what I was taught.
But so that's the same definition, right?
Kinda, sorta, but
so let me show you how they link. So, and then I want to get back to a couple of words in the definition. So the definition that I use was economics is the optimal allocation of resources under conditions of scarcity, right? So what that statement is saying is one is saying that the resources are scarce, right? Under these particular conditions, how are those economics or how are those resources distributed, right? What's the best way for us to distribute them? I mean, economics, when you get to the etymology of the word literally means like household management, right? Managing the resources of the home,
Yeah, I think
right?
it's the French. Yeah.
So when you get to the study of scarce resources, the study is studying how those resources are allocated. Like it gets back to allocation.
But
You
I
know,
guess
like,
for me, when you said optimal,
yeah,
like that's the thing that kind of took me on. Listen, I love economics, right? I almost at my economics undergrad. I have a
yeah.
whole economic story. But the one thing that's fouled in economics is it's all based on what's the term?
All things equal,
Not that wasn't the term I was going for. It was
not laissez
a
faire.
sensible person's viewpoint, right?
Yeah,
And they never account for emotions, and emotions exist in everything that's human. And
yeah,
so I always well, after 2008, that's when I got the realization that economics in that vein was flawed. It's still a worthy endeavor, in my opinion. I think it's something all Black people should study, but you have to factor in human emotion.
yeah. The human factor is critical. You
Yes,
know, and this conversation will go deep in another direction if once we start to unpack that. But
absolutely.
there's two terms in there that I want to focus on.
Okay.
First term is allocation. The second term is scarcity.
Mhm.
So, from the allocation perspective, the reason why economics becomes a trick bag, or most economic conversations become a trick bag, because it deals with allocation, not acquisition. This isn't a subject that's dealing with the acquisition of resources, right? Because under this particular economic warfare paradigm, resources are acquired via conquest, right?
Not always, but it fits neater in your worldview to say that, though. I get
Okay.
it.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, for
Yeah. Yeah.
my political worldview, right? I'm looking at an economic reality that we live within that rests this entire global economic system that we live within right now rests on the dispossession of African people and is built on the dispossession of African people, right?
A lot of
So Du Bois wrote an essay in 1915 called "The African Roots of War." Essentially why there's always a new scramble for Africa, because Africa, the continent, is with the global. It's the plate that the global economy rests on. And for those of us who are African people, if we want to disrupt this current reality where we are dispossessed, that means we have to disrupt the current global or economic paradigm. But I don't like to focus on allocation. I rather deal with acquisition of resources, because if you start to understand the acquisition component, that makes the warfare part a lot more clear. Because I mean, you study Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. There's really only two sources of wealth. There's land and then there's labor, right? Because labor, right, is the surplus that you get from your labor as the first creation. That's essentially what creates wealth, which is why communists talk about your labor is being exploited, or your
mhm.
surplus wealth is being stolen, right? So the point that I was trying to make, because you took me off with
I'm
the
sorry.
pushback, but the point that I was trying to make is that the reason why that definition is problematic is because it only deals with how the resources are allocated, but it doesn't start far enough back to first have a conversation about, well, how were they acquired and how were these resources acquired in the first place? And that's the conversation that's more political in nature, because these resources, whole nations, whole land masses were stolen. Gold, like, when you read Adam Smith, he has a dope quote in there where he talks about when the Spanish first got to what we refer to as Haiti today, right? He said when the Spanish first got to Saint Domingue, the natives that were there, like gold, so they was wearing the gold like it was like
It
it
was
was
all
it
over
was
the place.
nothing to them. It was abundant. Food was abundant, and the natives couldn't understand why the Spanish were just so excitable about this gold element. And it's because in the Spanish environment, food was scarce. The conditions were, environmentally speaking, you have an environment in the global south of abundance. You have an environment in the global north that's more scarce, more harsh conditions. And in that environment, the methods and the mechanisms of trade are a bit different, especially when you have a system in place where, baby, you really doing this right now? I'm on a call.
Listen, brother, I'm gonna commend you because you haven't lost thought. You ain't got mad. You ain't did nothing. You ain't show baby girl number love.
All right, give me a second, okay? I'm almost done. Yeah. So that's a deeper conversation to be had. I'll unpack that in a future presentation. But
well, listen, you're not. This is not gonna be the only time.
Yeah.
You like my long lost brother,
No,
literally and
I
figuratively.
appreciate that. For
Right.
sure.
So I think it's always good to build. Still sharpen steel. Still sharpen steel. I like to say diamonds sharpen diamonds because only a diamond can cut a diamond. Right. But let me come back to this economics point.
Yes, sir.
Economics is still a roughly new field of study. It's like the 1800s or something like that where they came up with it. It's a social science, right? And so much of the world was already kind of conquered and divided, so to speak. I'm not sure when in relations to economics creation and the Berlin Conference was actually happening when it happened. But when they were talking about allocation, they were talking about buying goods and services. So you are correct, though. It's across the whole spectrum. It's from acquisition to allocation, because even within the acquisition, there's an allocation of those resources. Sadly, when our brothers and sisters were brought here from the continent, they were allocated. Even though they were acquired, they were allocated. So it's both. It's both. But you don't know how happy I am. I can sit here and talk to a melanated brother, a couple shades darker than me, about economics. And that ain't no slight about the darkness, right? Darker the berry, sweeter the juice. So
for sure.
Yes. Like I am overjoyed with this. Let's check back in because I saw a couple of folks, and I know you gotta go. You gotta get the baby girl. All right. So I asked the question: which is more important, right? Which is better, Black history or Black wealth? And just real quick, community solutions process. Good day to you too, sis. Business is life. I agree. And Music Man, 1982. Welcome. Big Daddy still rocks. Still got me talking about this grown man, referring to him as Big Daddy. What a shame. All right. Big Daddy says, I'm going to say wealth. Okay. Big Daddy's got wealth. Leonard Richardson, what's up, Leonard? He says Black wealth. I'm going to say Zion. It's not D Zion. I believe D's silent. But Zion says just 100. What's up to you? All right. Both are equally important in the world we're in. We are in. Sorry, y'all. I read literally when I read these. We're in need of both to maintain both. I agree.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I agree. That to me, that's the money shot right there, folks. We need both, because if we are not the writers of our history, we don't have history.
True.
Kind of like what we see now, but we're able to kind of flush it out by digging deep. Sadly, other people and other ethnic groups don't got to dig that deep. We got to dig deep. The Birdman says, y'all brothers are killing it. All right. Thank you, sir.
Shout out to the Birdman.
Give it up to that. Got to give us the horns.
Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what I was thinking about today? It's funny. I was driving today, and somebody sent me a real long message about the conversation that I was having with the young brother. I think he's older than me, actually, with the brother, the FBA brother, whatever. And, it depends on where you fall on the conversation. Some people thought that I was mean-spirited, and, some people
you were frustrated
that I showed too much, emotion, or, I kind of continued to let my frustration come through. My wife said to me, she said, you didn't John Henry Clark the situation. And my response to her,
shout out to that sister. And I don't think y'all understand what she means by that, right? Because John Henry Clark has a saying, what is it? The saying is,
I only debate my equals. All I teach.
Right. even
Yeah.
though that is a bit condescending.
It
I'll
is.
say
It's a
this.
condescending statement. It's meant to be.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be. So I'll say this, and this is what I got from my Pan-African mentor, right? Every chance we have, we should take to teach, reach, and build.
Mhm.
And I know you were frustrated, but I'll just say this, and we can talk more about it privately. I do think you could have taken a little bit more patience to reach, teach, and build with him, because I got to give him credit. He didn't have all the emotional responses and wasn't upset. And I understand why you're upset. I do.
Yeah.
Because I had some of these conversations, and it's like, have y'all not really thought this through? And I feel like I'll say this publicly, and I'll get back to the comments, right? The Tarzan effect, I call it the Tarzan. The Tarzan effect is so powerful that we feel that Africa and anything African related is so negative and so bad and so much of the devil that we won't even allow ourselves to imagine that we're connected to Africa.
Yeah.
Because they automatically think we got on dashikis and beads and mudcloth and barefoot and butt naked. Not to say, whoa, Timbuktu is there. Not to say that, whoa, the pyramids are there. Not to say, Zimbabwe, it means the Great Wall. And like, it's one of the major treasures of the world. Like, nobody thinks about the beauty of Africa because our Black history has been taught by someone else. Y'all like that tie-in? Y'all like this segue?
But there's another part to that. It's because we've been deprived of our wealth, and we see America as the symbol of wealth, and it's like we're in such close proximity to it, And for us, it's like I listen to Dr. Claude Anderson. He makes it. He goes out of his way to say we have no connection to Africa. We ain't African. We got no connection to it, right? But a lot of that is just
shout out to Dr. Claude, by the way.
I don't want to call it political theater, but it's just strategy to attach yourself or to shore up your claim on the wealth that your ancestors labored to create. For your ancestors had all of their surplus value stolen. Your ancestors, their labor represents the accumulated wealth of this nation. That's why I call my channel the American Wealth Network. Because when you really unpack American wealth, I'm really just having a conversation about us, right? Our centuries of free labor under the whip and under terrorism is what produced America's wealth, right? So when I call it the American Wealth Network, I'm having.
I would take it a step further. I would say it produced the Western world's wealth.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. Flat out.
I like to do that because I'm hoping to help us to get to think more in a global context versus just an Americanized context.
So the next conversation, the next point of that statement that I was going to make is when I say American wealth, I'm not just talking about the United States of America. I'm talking about, North America, South America, and the Caribbean, because this enterprise, right, the slave or plantation enterprise was throughout the diaspora, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have family enslaved in Brazil, in Suriname, on the Caribbean islands, in North America. This thing is we are the wealth. Our ancestors' unpaid labor is literally the principal wealth of the modern economic system that the Western world rests upon. But the reason why I brought up that brother, because I was thinking about this when I was driving today. Dr. Clark didn't have to contend. Well, first of all, folks, I think that back then everybody didn't have a mic. Social media has given everybody a mic.
Absolutely.
Right. And back then, I think that you would check yourself. You kind of knew okay, I'm out of my depth here, so I'm going to listen to learn. I'm not going to I'm not going to jump in and try to debate Dr. Clark. Right. You wouldn't see that occur, but you see that now. But there's another point that I want to speak to about my frustration. The exhaustion that I could not stop myself from displaying was a result of a violation of what we refer to as accountants is it's a violation of GAAP, right? And let me break this down for you.
General accepted accounting principles for everybody who doesn't know.
Yeah, it's the first two letters in GAAP, generally accepted.
Mm-hmm.
The point of that conversation that was so frustrating to me is some of his questions were the equivalent of flat earth questions to me. It's like it's already generally accepted that the earth is round. Right. So when he was asked like some of his questions or his statements and it was like we've already these things have already been debated and agreed upon. Like you're asking me a 1+1, like you shouldn't even be having this conversation with me if that's a question. And I think that was the exhaustion and frustration
I got
that I was because he was
and I understand you the lens. I understand the angle you were coming from, but I'm gonna say I was cheering on the side. I was like, I wanted you to dismantle the hip hop cult. I know you didn't want to,
Mhm.
but I wanted you to dismantle it because hip hop is a Pan-African phenomenon.
Mhm.
We only talk about it from the North American United States framework. Civil rights is a Pan-African phenomenon. People don't think about that though, right? So we want to cling so hard to this thing called America, to these ideas of America. Forget about what you're willing to throw away. That's my issue with FBA, and I haven't really talked about it. I've talked about it with some people, but I won't really get into deep debates with them because I know it's not productive.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you think about it, they're talking about foundational Americans, foundational Black Americans. What about all the people that came here after 1865? There was a lot. They suffered tyranny as well. They suffered redlining. They suffered Jim Crow. Like the argument in of itself, I don't truly understand. And for it being the brainchild from many intellectuals, I'm like, where's the intellectually happening? And I don't consider myself an intellectual. I don't have any master's or graduate level courses. I'm a nerd. But I'm just like, these are just basic things that I don't get. And again, so I was hoping you would stop all over that because even some of their quote unquote points that they don't want to share with the other brothers and sisters in the continent are pure points that we all work together.
Yeah. For me, I really was trying. I didn't want to get into the weeds.
Oh, I know,
And
but y'all did. But I know.
Yeah. He was definitely pulling me into the weeds, man. It's like to be honest, I open myself up to these types of conversations, especially when I think that somebody is sincere. No pun intended to the brother.
I think he was. I think
I think he. That's what I'm saying. I think he was a very sincere. I opened myself up to the conversation because, in a sense, like we have a responsibility to really confront or combat misinformation and miseducation. Right? We do have that responsibility. Bob Baruti says that we have the mandate. He says you have to teach the ignorant but ignore stupidity. Right? Ignorant doesn't mean unintelligent. It just means that you're not working with a full deck. Not that you're not insane. It just means you don't have all the information. In business, they were referred to as information asymmetry, right? Like the analysis here is not symmetrical. Like one side has access to way more information than the other side, and that becomes hard because you almost put yourself in like a lose-lose situation. You know what I mean? Because anybody who's observing that discussion, they're gonna be like, "Well, I don't like that person. That person comes off like a."
I think you have to take it from a different perspective, though.
I'm listening.
I think you have to look at it. It's just like when your baby girl's coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get mad at baby girl. And I know in our history we about whoopings and all of that, but we've evolved now. We know better now, and it's like they go to do something. It's like no, and then you just grab their hand and you guide them and redirect them. So I know this might come off condescending, but when you go back to Dr. Clark's statement, everybody's my child also, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, we can either build together or I can teach you. But if I'm teaching you, you're my child, so to speak. You're my son, if we're talking hip hop, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of got to treat it like that. And you got a lot of information to give. And, I would hate to see that overshadowed by what's being perceived as anger or frustration or emotions. But let me jump back to some of these because I know you got to go.
Yes, sir.
Let me see. The Birdman asks, what makes you feel economics is flawed? I feel economics is flawed because it doesn't factor in real life human situations, right? What's going to happen when you have no food and you have no money, but they're saying, oh, the price of this is X and it's produced by the market, but you ain't got none of that. Economics will say, well, the common, I gotta look this up, the common man theory, you go get a job. Well, for black folks, it wasn't always easy to get a job.
Yeah.
And just to go off on a quick rant real quick, since we're talking Black history, I need y'all to understand Black history. Black men were not always the providers in Black households. There was plenty of times when sisters held it down because sisters were more amenable and more appealing to get jobs, whether it's telephone operator or doing day's work or domestic work, as some people would do. And a lot of times Black men were not giving the access to that. So this whole fallacy that you're not a man if you don't pay everything, that's some European stuff.
Yeah.
I believe it at that. I believe it at that. All right. Conquest and passing down from generations too, right? I'm not sure. I think I lost. I'm not sure where you're at with that, Birdman. Do you know where he's at on wealth?
I think the acquisition of wealth.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, generational wealth works both on Black side and white side and all the other sides.
Yes, sir.
All right. Capitalism. Gotcha. Interesting. Gotcha. Surplus value. You're definitely off our backs. So, yeah, absolutely. All right, so Birdman says Black history. All right, so we got to vote for Black history. It seems like everybody's voting for Black wealth. All right, thank you, Jeff.
Black history is Black wealth.
I have a shirt that says that, actually.
Yeah.
We need to know our history. Yeah. We need to know our history to understand how our wealth was created and stolen and taken. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right.
So if we did a comparative analysis, right, of like the financial education movement of the late 19th, early 20th century, as compared to the financial education movement today, I mean, I think there's a lot more energy. Today has a lot more of like the hip hop flair. We have greater communication tools, right? However, man, that foundation from the late 19th century, early 20s is like today can't even match it. It can't, like, if you look at like what Booker T. Washington was able to do with the National Business Association, the National Business Society, right? That through that you get Harlem, right? Because out of that, you get the African American Realty Company, which essentially is the bedrock or the foundation of modern day Harlem, right? Through that you get it's like, because we had the politic and the cultural back then. I mean, come on, man. Booker T. Washington was talking about education's on thrift, right? Thrift is just another word for, what did they used to call it back in the day? Home economics, right? Like knowing how to balance a budget, knowing how to manage a home. If you can manage a home, you can manage a nation. And I just feel like back then, what we were able to create with the financial education that was being developed. I see, Princess. That's beautiful. Okay, I'll fix it. I'm almost done. I'll be done in 5 minutes. I'm almost done. But just back then, I think for an example, I'll give you a great example. The UNIA in their constitution, it had a clause in its constitution that says you cannot officially have a chapter of the UNIA if you don't have a physical building to hold meetings in, right? So you either had to rent a property or buy a property because you had to have a space to hold meetings for the public. The UNIA had more than 300 physical properties across the United States for their members to meet in. In fact, right there next to Temple's campus is one of the last physical properties owned by the UNIA. Right? That building was purchased by a member, Thomas W. Harvey, and gifted to the chapter, Division 121, in perpetuity. Now that people are fighting over it now because Temple is right there and Temple is offering all types of millions, like, hey, let us buy this building off you. But that building is fully owned. There ain't no mortgage on it. So I'm just saying, and this was the thinking that they said you have to have a home, you have to have a foundation. So the members would come together. Like just think if we did that today. I mean, we do some things online, but just the ability for us to come to, I think of like the so-called WeWork model. It's like where you get a corporate building and then you start to lease out like office space. But what if you didn't take that approach? What if we just got like a building, Northern Liberties, wherever we get it at, and you got your studio space in there, right? Because you do content, right? So we got a studio space that we all sharing. Like it becomes a collective hub of economics, politics, business, and culture. And it's self-sustained by the community and its members. That's what the UNIA was.
Yeah. I mean, now I think it'll be a little bit more tricky. I mean, but they do have co-ops, right? So it's possible. It's definitely possible. But I wanted to tap into this real quick. The Birdman says, yeah, he seemed to be accepting Homo while he's doing though. I would disagree with that. He was steadfast on FBA to the grave. Yeah, that's all I got, y'all. That's all I got on that one. Now, the Birdman, I wanted to talk about this real quick. So you said, what do you mean by the Pan-African phenomenon? So hip hop was created by not just Black so-called Americans or Black African Americans. It was Bambaataa, who was Jamaican, right? So that in and of itself makes it Pan-African.
Yep.
It wasn't just in one landmass. And then when you look at some of the influences of Fela Kuti on some of the early hip hop, when you look at, I just thought about this. When you look at Bambaataa, who traveled to Africa, and I'm not trying to get in no trouble, but when you traveled to Africa, you can't tell me he didn't get any influence, insight from any of his travels over there. Got a scholarship to go to Africa. And many don't talk about that, right? So you got that. Then you have a lot of breakers, a lot of Puerto Ricans. Now, some people don't like to call Puerto Ricans Black. I get it. But if we're being technical about what African diaspora is, it are people of African lineage. A lot of Puerto Ricans, I would probably say the majority of them, are of African lineage.
They have some African lineage for sure.
Doesn't matter.
Taino and African lineage. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they accept it or not, right? Same thing with people talk about Cubans. Well, Fidel had said that Cubans are Africans, but it's the same type thing with Cuba as it is with Africa. I mean, with Puerto Rico. There were many others. I can't name them all off the top of my head, but there were many others because, again, when Black folks get together, I don't care where you're from. It's in our DNA. We share many different things. We let this white supremacist thing called nationalism get in the way of many things. And so it becomes really rough, and we get distracted by what the real enemy is. But we can talk more about that, the Birdman, though. Appreciate the question. All right. JT Coins. All right, JT, we got to get together. All right. Appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Gotta give you the horns. Thank you for that. Everybody go follow JT Coins. The brother makes coins, y'all. Literally makes coins out of stuff. Makes jewelry out of coins. Excuse me. I'm not sure what you mean by that, right? They suffered FHA. You talking about housing? He seemed to have good intentions. Yeah, I know you're talking about sincere. Oh, I think you might have meant to say FBA. Gotcha. So sometimes, y'all, when I'm reading these, I'm like reading linear and I can't process the way I would normally. So bear with me. All right, baby girl. Can't harm daddy. Yeah, well, yes. So Bawana, I believe I'm saying your name right. I'm not talking about no physical altercations. That's a different thing altogether. I'm talking about two brothers building, talking, using their words. Now, if it goes to that level, then it must be dealt with to the fullest extreme. That's not what I mean though. So I would think nobody else got what I was saying misconstrued, but be clear, because I understand what you mean, because there are a lot of ignorant folks out here. Then a lot of FBA guys don't understand that they need to have a dialogue with Africans. I understand why Africans feel the way that they do about African Americans. You know what? I've sat on a conference between so-called continental Africans and Africans here in America, and a lot of times
they're not productive because the adults in the adults in either room aren't the ones driving the conversation.
No, I
Mhm.
wouldn't say they're not productive. I would push back on that.
Okay.
I would say some of them are productive. I've seen plenty of them. You got to have the right crew, just like with anybody else. Who wants to actually build? Who wants to actually have a conversation? Who wants to build?
Hmm.
I might try to find some of the ones that I was a part of and share them. Okay, got the point understood. All right, my man. All right, this is something I didn't know that Marcus Garvey was ahead of his time. Marcus Garvey was way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Way ahead. I mean, listen, y'all, it's Black History Month. Go find some Garvey. I know many of us love to, well, you know what, brother, I know you got to go.
Yeah.
You're yawning over there. Baby girl's coming. So let's close out now. Definitely want to have you back. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Awali.
For sure. For
And
sure. I'll bring
closing.
you over to interview you as well.
Yes, absolutely. And closing, and I'll let you have the last word on Wally. And closing is Black History Month, y'all. Black History Month was not given to us by the government. A Black man created it and expanded on it. So
Yes,
by doing so, by saying you want to cancel Black History Month, you are actually disrespecting your ancestors. Think about that real quick, because I've been pushing back on this notion: is Black history even worth it anymore? But
yeah.
if we are Black people, we respect our ancestors, we respect our elders. And so with that being said, go read some Garvey, go read some Lumumba, go read some Nkrumah, right? Look at some other people outside of your normal Rosa Parks, no diss to them, your Martin Luther Kings, no diss to them, right? Because they were all relevant to our struggle. But read and research other things. In closing, Brother Omawali, what do you got for me?
No, I'm gonna build on what you gave. Yeah, Black History Month was not given. It was created by Carter G. Woodson, who initially gave us Negro History Week, and the goal of Negro History Week at the time was it was supposed to be an opportunity for you to present your findings, right? Because you're supposed to be studying Black history around the year, and this one particular week was supposed to be the opportunity for you to present your findings that you found through the year, right? It would be celebrated on so-called Negro History Week. Now, what's very important that we need to understand, because I see a lot of people today talking about, well, Black History Month is about African Americans. Carter G. Woodson, along with the other men of his time, they were race men. So whenever they talked and spoke about the race, right? When they spoke about Negro history or Black history, they're not just talking about the history of Black people in America, right? For an example, if you go look at some of the early writings in the Journal of Negro History, the Journal of Negro History by Carter G. Woodson, right? Those writings deal with Black people around the globe. So it was never just about so-called African Americans or Black people here in the United States. It was about the history of our group or the history of our race, right? You see the race first here in the back, right? So they were all race men who had racial consciousness, right? W.E.B. Du Bois, 1897, writes a fantastic dissertation called The Conservation of Races, right? So whenever they're talking about race, or Black history or Negro history, they're not talking about one particular group of Black people. They're talking about the collective. So when you study Black history, study the collective. Your focus shouldn't just be what's happening in African, what's happened in so-called foundational Black America or ADOS. Study the history of our family in the Caribbean, study the history of our family in Latin America, study the history of our family on the continent, study the history of our family who made treks into Europe, right? Study this, study the history of our family who made treks into Asia, Eurasia, because Black history is global history, it's universal history, and you don't want to truncate it to just a period that starts at slavery and on these shores of the United States of America. So that would be my final piece right there.
Well, Brother Omawali, I don't have nothing else to add. That was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful piece right there. So let's just end it right there. Listen, y'all, I appreciate y'all coming to the Finance Row Show. We are here every week on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. We'll be back next week. And maybe I'll try to wrangle Brother Omawali to come back sooner than that.
All
All
right,
right,
for
y'all.
sure. For sure.
I'll see y'all another day. Have a good
All
one.
right, brother. Peace.